It was raining the day she left. Not a romantic drizzle, not the cinematic kind that makes you reflect on life. No, this was the kind that soaks through your bones, where the sky seems to mock you for ever believing in something as fragile as love. I remember standing there at the station, drenched, clutching a torn backpack that wasn't even mine. It was hers. Inside it, just an empty water bottle, a lipstick, and the receipt for 2 tickets. 2. But only one was used, hers. She didn't even look back. That's the part that keeps replaying in my mind. The way she boarded the train like I didn't exist, like the last 3 years were some sort of inconvenient delay in her grand plan. I shouted her name once. She didn't turn. The train began to move, and in that moment, it was like time split into 2 versions of me. One who still believed she'd step back out, and the other who already knew she never would. By the time the last carriage disappeared, I was no one. No wallet, no phone, not even the will to ask anyone for help. The station was nearly empty now, the last few passengers hurrying away like they were escaping the same storm that had already swallowed me whole. I stood there for a while, staring at the flickering lights above the platform. Every now and then, the sound of the loudspeaker would echo through the air, distorted and hollow. Trains kept coming and going, carrying people somewhere, anywhere, but me. I don't know how long I stood there, but my stomach began to twist in hunger, and I realized I hadn't eaten since morning. I tried to check my pockets again, hoping maybe I missed something. Nothing. Just lint, a broken keychain, and the faint smell of her perfume on my sleeve. That smell, it was like a ghost that wouldn't leave. Eventually, I wandered out of the station, hoping maybe someone would take pity on me. But this wasn't that kind of place. People here walk with purpose, eyes fixed straight ahead. It's funny, when you have nothing, you become invisible. Not metaphorically, literally. No one sees you. I could have screamed in their faces and they'd just step around me like I was a puddle. Hours must have passed. The rain eased up, replaced by that cold, damp mist that sticks to your skin. I found an old bench under a broken sign and sat there. The sign read, Platform 3, Departures. It was half rusted, letters fading. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Departures. Yeah, that sounded about right. Everyone departs eventually. That's when I heard it, a voice, soft, deliberate. You look like you've been waiting a long time. I turned around. There was a man standing behind me, late 60s, maybe 70s, dressed neatly but old-fashioned, wool coat, hat, cane. His eyes, though, they didn't focus. Not on me, not on anything. He was blind. For a moment, I didn't say anything, just nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. You could say that, I muttered, trying to sound casual. He smiled faintly. Waiting is a strange thing. It makes beggars out of kings and fools out of lovers. I didn't know what to say. The man tilted his head slightly, listening, maybe sensing the silence. Tell me, he said, are you waiting for someone or for something to change? I almost laughed. Both, maybe, though I think one already decided not to show up. He chuckled softly. Ah, the kind of waiting that doesn't end when the train leaves. He moved closer, tapping the ground with his cane, and stopped right in front of me. You sound like a man who's lost his map. No money, no place to go, am I right? I didn't respond, but the silence said enough. Good, he said after a pause. Then, perhaps you're the kind of man who can help me. That caught me off guard. Help you? I asked. Yes, he said, but you'll have to trust me. I don't make a habit of trusting strangers myself, but sometimes life puts 2 broken things together so they can hold each other up. I had no idea what he was talking about, but his voice, there was something oddly calm about it, like he'd seen every disaster life could throw and had come out the other side still unbothered. I'm listening, I said. He lowered his head slightly, as if deciding whether I was worthy of hearing what came next. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, Pretend to be my son. I blinked. What? Pretend to be my son, he repeated. My driver didn't show up today, probably ran off with the advance payment, and I need someone to take me home. It's not far from here. There's food, a warm bed, and a little money in it for you. I stared at him, half suspicious, half desperate. You're serious? Deadly, he said. You don't have to say much. Just walk beside me, help me into the car, and call me father if anyone asks. Simple. It was insane. Every instinct in me screamed, no. This was the kind of setup that ends with your photo in the newspaper under a headline like, Man found missing after helping stranger. But I was cold, hungry, and out of options. Fine, I said. I'll help. He smiled faintly, a knowing kind of smile. I knew you would. We walked together through the station's exit, the old man's cane tapping softly against the tiles. Outside, parked beneath a flickering streetlight, was a black sedan, polished, expensive, out of place in this forgotten corner of the city. He paused near it. Open the door, would you? I hesitated, still not sure what I was getting into, but I did. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something else, lavender maybe. He got in slowly, with the kind of grace that comes from habit. Now, he said, gesturing to the driver's seat. Your turn. I don't know how to drive, I admitted. Then it's a good thing I do, he said, surprising me again. He chuckled softly at my confusion. Get in, son. I did. And before I could process what was happening, the engine started. He drove, not fast, but steady, every movement deliberate, as if he could feel the road through his fingertips. I wanted to ask how, but the silence between us felt sacred, like breaking it would ruin something fragile. The rain had returned, this time gentler, tapping against the windshield like a lullaby. The city lights blurred past in streaks of orange and white. For the first time that day, I felt safe. After a while, he spoke. You know, people think blindness is darkness, but it isn't. It's just a different kind of seeing. You stop trusting what your eyes tell you and start noticing the weight of things, the way silence presses when someone's hiding pain, the way footsteps change when hope leaves. His words hit something inside me. I turned slightly toward him. So what do you see in me then? He smiled faintly, a man who's been betrayed, but also a man who hasn't yet realized that being abandoned is the first step to being found. I didn't know why, but my chest tightened hearing that. For the first time since the train left, I wanted to believe someone. He continued, My name's Rohan. What's yours? I hesitated. Then, for reasons I can't explain, I lied. Arjun, I said. He nodded, as if he already knew. Good. You'll keep that name for a while. I frowned. What do you mean? You'll see, he said, a trace of a smile in his voice. But for now, just remember, when people ask who you are, tell them you're my son. We drove in silence for a while longer until the city lights faded and the road narrowed. Trees lined both sides, their shadows stretching long and thin under the headlights. The air felt heavier here, like the kind that carries secrets. Almost there, he murmured. The car slowed, turning through an old iron gate that creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Ahead of us stood a mansion, not grand but old, proud, like it had seen better days and refused to forget them. The rain made the stone glisten under the dim light above the entrance. As we stopped, he said quietly, You'll start to understand why I needed you soon enough. And in that moment, something in his tone changed. It wasn't kindness anymore. It was something else, something colder. And that's when I realized I hadn't escaped the train station. I had just boarded another kind of journey entirely. The house looked like it had been frozen in time. Its windows shuttered, the walls cracked in places, vines creeping up like nature was trying to reclaim it. The rain had stopped by then, but the air carried that after-storm silence, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. The old man, Rohan, got out of the car, without waiting for help, moving slower now, but with the same deliberate control he'd shown the entire drive. I followed, my shoes sinking slightly into the wet gravel. The front door opened before either of us reached it. A tall man in a black coat stood there, face stern, eyes sharp. He looked me up and down, then turned to Rohan. You're late, he said, voice calm but clipped. Rohan's head tilted slightly. And you're still rude, I see. Some things never change. The man didn't respond. His eyes flicked toward me. This is the driver? Rohan smiled faintly. No, he said. This is my son. The man's expression didn't change, but his silence said more than any words could. He stepped aside, and we entered. The interior was dimly lit, the kind of light that hides more than it reveals. Everything inside screamed wealth that had aged poorly, grand furniture covered in dust sheets, paintings staring down with cracked varnish, chandeliers missing pieces. Yet despite all that decay, the place had a pulse. It felt lived in, watched over. Sit, Rohan said, gesturing toward a chair near the fireplace. The fire was low, just embers glowing faintly, but it was enough to chase away the chill from outside. As I sat, he removed his hat and gloves, placing them neatly on the table beside him. You must be wondering, he said slowly, why a blind man would need a stranger to pretend to be his son. I nodded cautiously. You could say that. He chuckled. Good. Curiosity means you still have fight left in you. Most people who've been abandoned lose that first. He leaned back, folding his hands over his cane. The truth is, I have no family left. Not officially, anyway. But there are people, certain people, who still believe I do, and sometimes letting them believe that keeps me alive. That didn't make much sense, but I didn't interrupt. There's a dinner tomorrow night, he continued. An old business partner of mine is coming, and he expects to meet my son. The problem is, my real son died 15 years ago. My chest tightened. And you want me to replace him? Just for one night, he said, his tone even. You'll play your role, eat well, sleep in a warm bed, and walk out with enough money to rebuild your life. All I ask is that you follow my lead. It sounded simple, too simple. And if I say no? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then you'll be out in the cold again, with nothing but your pride for company. I wanted to argue, but he was right. Pride doesn't feed you. Pride doesn't keep you warm. Pride doesn't help when your wife disappears with your future on a train. So I said the words that would change everything. I'll do it. Good, he said softly. Then tonight, you'll sleep here. Tomorrow, we'll make you my son. He stood, tapping his cane once. Ajay will show you to your room. The man from the doorway, Ajay, appeared almost instantly, silent as a shadow. He nodded toward the staircase, and I followed. As we climbed, the wooden steps groaned under our weight. Every sound echoed through the vast emptiness of the house. Don't wander, Ajay said without looking back. His voice carried that subtle warning you don't question. The old man likes his privacy. He opened a door at the end of the hall. Inside was a modest room, a single bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the courtyard. A tray sat on the table with bread, soup, and water. It wasn't much, but after the day I'd had, it felt like a feast. AJ lingered for a moment, then said, You're not the first. I turned. What do you mean? But he was already walking away, leaving me with that cryptic line hanging in the air. I didn't sleep much that night. The bed was comfortable, but the silence was too heavy. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside sounded deliberate, like the house was alive and whispering things I wasn't meant to hear. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps outside my door, slow, measured. When I looked, there was no one there. Morning came gray and muted. I found fresh clothes laid neatly at the foot of my bed, formal, expensive, clearly tailored for someone taller, but they'd do. When I went downstairs, the smell of tea filled the air. Rohan was already seated at the long dining table, his posture straight, his expression calm. Sleep well, son? He asked, a faint trace of humor in his voice. I nodded, sitting across from him. As well as I could. He gestured toward the table. Eat. You'll need your strength. We ate mostly in silence. Then as I finished the last bite, he said, There are things you need to know before tonight. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. This is who you'll be. I took it. It was an old, faded picture of a young man in a suit standing beside a younger Rohan. They looked genuinely happy. Your son, I said quietly. He nodded. Avi. He died in a car crash, or so the papers say. I looked up. What do you mean, or so the papers say? He tilted his head, a faint smile playing at his lips. Let's just say, not everyone in this house believes he's dead. I froze. What? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Tonight, you'll meet people who think they know the truth. They'll test you. They'll ask questions only Avi would know. When that happens, you'll look at me, and I'll answer for you. Understand? I nodded slowly. Good, he said. Because if you slip, they'll know you're not who you claim to be. And trust me, they won't be kind about it. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the look on his face told me not to. That evening, as the sun began to set, the mansion came alive. Lights flickered on in every room, casting long shadows across the walls. Cars started arriving one by one, their engines echoing through the courtyard. I stood by the staircase, heart pounding, wearing Avi's clothes and a mask I wasn't sure I could keep on. Rohan stood beside me, his hand resting on his cane like a king awaiting his subjects. Remember, he whispered, you're my son. No matter what happens, never deny it. The first guest entered, a woman in her 50s, elegant, confident. Her eyes fell on me instantly. She froze. Avi? She whispered. Rohan smiled faintly. You remember him well, don't you? Her face went pale, eyes wide. But he died. Rohan chuckled softly. And yet, here he stands. She stared at me like I was a ghost, and in that moment I realized maybe to her, I was. The woman's trembling hand reached toward me, fingers brushing my sleeve as if to confirm I was real. Her eyes glistened with a mix of disbelief and something darker, fear, maybe. Rohan's faint smile never wavered, but I could feel his attention sharpen like a blade, tracking every movement, every breath. "It's been a long time, Mira," he said softly, and her name seemed to hang in the air like a secret. "You remember what I told you back then? Truth bends to those strong enough to hold it." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She turned her gaze to me again, studying my face like she was comparing me to a ghost she once knew. He looks just like him," she murmured, "even the eyes." Rohan's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "Of course he does. A son always returns to what he's bound to." I didn't move. I just stood there, nodding slightly when Mira's eyes met mine, pretending to belong in a life that wasn't mine. She reached out again, but then pulled back suddenly, glancing around as if she'd already said too much. "You shouldn't have brought him back here," she whispered. Rohan tilted his head. "And yet here you are," he said, with that same calm, dangerous tone. Before I could ask what any of that meant, other guests began to arrive. Men in tailored suits, women dripping in quiet wealth, people who spoke in polite tones that hid sharp edges. Every single one greeted Rohan with forced warmth, but when they looked at me, something in their expressions shifted. Some smiled too wide. Others avoided my eyes altogether. Dinner was set in a grand hall lined with portraits. Each face on the wall seemed to watch us, the paint cracked, the eyes hollow. The table stretched longer than necessary, and the silverware looked untouched for years. The air was heavy with perfume and tension. Rohan took the head seat, motioning for me to sit beside him. As I did, I caught my reflection in one of the polished plates. I barely recognized myself. I didn't look like a lost man anymore. I looked like someone who'd stepped into another person's skin. The conversation started light, business talk, property, the usual small talk of people who wanted to sound important. But then Mira leaned forward, her voice cutting through the chatter. "So, Avi," she said, smiling thinly, "tell me, where have you been all these years?" Every head turned toward me. I froze. My mind went blank. I could feel Rohan's calm beside me, but I couldn't meet his face without making it obvious I needed help, so I did the only thing I could. I lied. "Abroad," I said quietly, pretending to stir my drink. "I needed to get away. After the accident." Mira's eyes narrowed. "The accident you supposedly didn't survive?" The table went silent. Rohan's voice broke through, smooth and unhurried. "You forget, Mira, that I never confirmed his death. The papers said what they wanted. I simply let them." Her jaw tightened. "And the body?" He smiled faintly. "Bodies are found every day. That doesn't make them true." The others murmured uneasily. I didn't understand half of what was being implied, but I played along, keeping my expression steady, even as my heart hammered in my chest. Dinner continued, but the tone had changed. I noticed the glances exchanged between guests, whispers passed behind wine glasses. The name Avi slipped from their mouths like a curse they were afraid to repeat too loudly. At one point, an older man sitting across the table leaned in, his voice low but cutting. "If you truly are who he says you are," he said, eyes fixed on me, "then perhaps you can tell us what happened that night." I felt the air tighten. "What night?" I asked. He smiled without warmth. "The night your car went off the bridge, the one that took your mother's life." My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected that. Rohan didn't move, but I could sense something coiling behind his calm exterior. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then, softly, Rohan spoke. "That's enough, Arvind. Some ghosts should stay buried." Arvind didn't back down. "You brought him back, Rohan. If he's your son, he should remember the truth." Rohan turned his head slightly toward me. "Do you remember, Avi? It was a test, one meant for the others, not for me." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "I remember everything." Arvind leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Is that so? Then you remember the call you made that night?" I froze again, but Rohan's voice cut through before I could stumble. "He remembers the part that matters," he said, "and that's enough." The table fell silent. No one spoke after that. The rest of the meal passed in quiet unease, and when it ended, Rohan stood, his cane tapping once against the floor. "Thank you all for coming," he said calmly. "My family is whole again. You may go now." One by one, they left. Except for Mira. She lingered by the doorway, her gaze locked on me. "You shouldn't have come back," she said softly. and then turned to leave. When the last car's headlights disappeared into the night, the house fell quiet again. Rohan and I were alone in the hall, the fire burning low behind us. He turned toward me, his blind eyes fixed on something far beyond me. "You did well," he said. "They believe you." I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. What was that all about? Why were they acting like I was some kind of ghost? Rohan smiled faintly. "Because to them you are." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He walked toward the fire, resting his cane against the mantel. "My son didn't die that night," he said quietly. "But he was taken from me, hidden, erased." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "By who?" He turned his face slightly toward me. "By the same people who sat at that table tonight." I swallowed hard. "And you think I can help you get him back?" He shook his head slowly. "No. I think you already have." For a moment I didn't understand, but then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small locket. Inside was a photo, my face, taken years ago, before I even met my wife. My blood ran cold. How could you have this?" He smiled softly, almost kindly. "Because, my son, sometimes the truth finds its way back on its own." I stepped back, heart racing. "What are you saying?" His voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced everything around us. "You aren't pretending to be my son," he said. "You've just forgotten that you were." The room spun. The fire cracked behind me, and suddenly, every word, every look, every whisper from the night began to twist into something else, something I couldn't explain. And that's when I realized, maybe I hadn't been abandoned at the train station. Maybe I'd been brought back.